Well, there's a lot in the news lately about about China, and even over the weekend there was some legislators being challenged to have China pay for coronavirus. I'm not sure what that means, but maybe we have somebody to help us with it. But China is certainly now getting a lot of pushback from around the world. Very timely to have back with us today Curtis Ellis. He is the policy director at American First Policy. And let me encourage you to check out their website. Again, policy director for America First Policies. Curtis, good to see you, friend. How are you, bud?
Good. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good. Thanks for your time. So enjoyed you last time when we got into this, but boy, the tensions now between the U.S. and China is escalating rapidly. Where do you think it is, and how bad could it get?
Well, we're finally waking up to the fact that we don't need China as much as China needs us, and we have needed China more than we should. We had been deluding ourselves for decades that somehow by giving China all of our technology, giving them our industries, giving them our jobs, China would become a trusted partner, an ally, actually. It would become more democratic and more peaceful and more free. And the Marxist Leninist party that rules China would suddenly become a social democratic party, like something you'd see in France or Germany. And that's not the case. That policy has been a tremendous failure. It's destabilized the United States. And in fact, we've become more like China in some ways. Attorney General Barr gave a speech last week in which he talked about how American companies are now towing the Chinese Communist Party line. They're firing employees who say not nice things, not nice according to the wishes and definition of the Chinese Communist Party. If you put up a tweet that says "Free Tibet," you'll get fired by Marriott Hotels. If the Chinese Communist Party doesn't like the way your movie script is written, Disney will change the script in order to please the censors. This is not free speech. This is not the American ideal. So we're being weakened both economically by losing our jobs and our industries. Now we've seen everything is made in China. So much is made in China. We can't even make Q-tips in this country anymore. When we needed Q-tips in order to administer tests for the coronavirus, we had to scramble to try to repatriate the production of Q-tips, of swabs, cotton swabs. That's how really imbalanced it's become. So when legislators talk about about making China pay for the coronavirus, I think the best way we can make China pay for the coronavirus is for us to make our own stuff again. We don't have to try to extract reparations from the Chinese Communist Party the way the Allies penalized Germany in the Versailles Treaty after World War I. That would be counterproductive. And they would only be giving us the money that we sent them in the first place when we buy everything made in China. So let's stop making everything in China, make it here the way we used to, and that'll have the effect of making them pay. But it would more importantly have the effect of making our economy strong again. And it would end so many of the problems that you're seeing all this unrest about currently. Income inequality, lack of opportunity in the inner cities, poor education systems because we don't have funding for schools. All of that would be resolved immediately if we restored our economic activity, if we restored our economy, if we restored production in the United States.
Some have said this is actually even a national security issue as it relates to our dependency upon China, especially for pharmaceuticals. And what you just mentioned, there is seemingly now a wake up that we should bring a lot of this stuff back. Is that hurting China now? Are they beginning to feel the pain, so to speak, of us saying no more China?
Yes, they actually are. You're seeing increased bank failures, bad loan defaults in China. They're frantically pumping money into the money supply, into the economy to keep things going there. Many companies have announced plans to move their supply chains out of China. They're looking for other places to do business. Many companies already have. So this is putting the squeeze on the Chinese economy. and on the Chinese Communist Party. They also have a very huge problem with floods right now on the Yangtze River. That's another story entirely. But our intent, they never expected the United States to do this. They never expected the Western world to say, enough, we're not going to support this brutal regime, which, by the way, I'd like to point out to your viewers, the Chinese Communist Party is running concentration camps in the western end of the country for the ethnic Muslim minority there, the Uyghurs. They're trying to teach them atheism. They want them to renounce their faith in God. And they're conducting demographic genocide through forced abortion, forced sterilization of the women. It's horrific. It is horrific. And the Communist Party always thought, well, the Western countries, the United States, Western Europe, would sell out its values for a fast buck. And unfortunately, Germany doesn't see any problem doing business with a country that runs concentration camps. And I could be snide and say, well, we really wouldn't expect any better from Germany now, would we? But I do expect better from the United States. And I would hope all of your listeners and all of your viewers, as a matter of principle and faith, say we can't do business with a communist, with an atheistic regime that has no respect for life and values like this. And the same goes for companies like Apple and General Motors and Nike. There's a whole list of companies that are using the forced labor from these concentration camps to produce the products that are sold in the United States. And that's really unacceptable.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me take a quick break. I got some more questions for you. Again, delighted to have back with us today Curtis Ellis. He's the Policy Director of American First Policies. We'll be right back.
Asante has helped a lot of people in our community in a lot of different ways. This was a chance for us to give back to them. So we all need to figure out a way to help out. Instead of be frustrated or overly sad, how can we help our community and the people in our community? I wasn't in the classroom teaching kids. I was in the classroom with equipment that wasn't being used. If I could use the equipment to provide some PPE for our healthcare community. My name is Brenda. I teach pre-engineering and architecture at Grants Pass High School, and community lives here.
Every day we are reminded how important home is. This is our safe spot for family and friends. Whether you are buying a home or selling your current home, you need to choose an agent you can trust to work hard for you. I'm Gwen Christensen with John L. Scott. You can trust me with one of the biggest decisions you'll make. I have the knowledge of the local market and take the time to listen and clearly address your questions. My clients remain loyal and refer. That says something. When you're ready to buy or sell, contact me, Gwen Christensen, real estate broker with John L. Scott.
So we were walking to school. At the corner, we waited for the traffic light.
I started thinking about lunch. Mom packed me turkey and cheese.
She's
I really want
smart,
cheese pizza,
but
like at Luigi's.
sometimes her mind wanders.
They have this video game there, and Kate's got the high score. We should have a sleepover. Maybe I should pack my pajamas.
I remember saying, Laura? Laura?
I think I heard Mom say something.
The sign says don't walk.
Sometimes it's so overwhelming.
When we finally got there,
she gave me a hug goodbye.
I really hope she doesn't
I
have
really
another
hope I
bad
don't
day
have
at
another
school
bad day at
today.
school today.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free online resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Here you'll get personalized recommendations, practical tips, daily access to experts, and more. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org.
Dr. Robert Jeffress shares inspiring messages of faith and hope from First Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas, to believers around the world.
It's only a heart that is stamped forgiven that is welcomed into heaven. That's all that matters. Being forgiven of our sins. God is able and willing to forgive you and to welcome you into heaven.
Watch Pathway to Victory Monday at 6:30 on the Dove TV. Bayless Conley answers tough questions facing Christians today, diving deep into Scripture and using real-world examples of faith in action.
I don't know if you realize it or not, but God's goal for you is not heaven. God's goal for you is growth. When's the last time you just went out and laid under the stars and thought about how big and how powerful and how grand our God is?
Answers with Bayless Conley, 9 p.m. Saturday on the Dove TV.
All right, what an honor to have back with us today Curtis Ellis. He's the Policy Director for America First Policies. His website is ALAPAC, ALAPAC.org. Check it out, ALAPAC.org. Curtis, boy, so much here. First of all, as you know, the U.S. ordered the China consulate in Houston to be shut down. Why the Houston one?
Okay. I've been saying this right from the jump, and now it's been confirmed by government sources. You look at what's been going on in Houston. Houston has major medical research facilities. MD Anderson is a major cancer research center, and the University of Texas Galveston is a national laboratory, United States national laboratory. They get funding from the U.S. government to conduct medical research. Both of these institutions had to expel researchers because they were on the payroll of the Chinese Communist Party. And the U.S. Education Department sent a letter to the University of Texas several months ago asking them to explain all of their contacts and contracts with Chinese institutions. Interestingly, this University of Texas facility in Galveston, which is the greater Houston area, down on the coast there by Houston, was the home, and one of the researchers there was Dr. Shi, the famous bat woman, who was conducting bat coronavirus research in Wuhan. And she had a relationship with this laboratory in the Houston area. So and just right before the Houston embassy consulate was shut down, before we ordered it shut down, the Department of Justice and the FBI issued an indictment against several Chinese hackers who were hacking medical research in the United States. The FBI field office involved in that investigation, San Antonio, Texas. So we're seeing that this southeast, this Houston consulate was a hub of activity for espionage across the southeastern United States. That's the medical research. You can only imagine they were doing some trying to steal trade secrets and conduct industrial espionage in the energy sector as well. Houston, of course, is very famous as the home of our petroleum industry.
Do you expect some more closures of consulates across the country?
That's an interesting question because Houston is by far not the largest embassy, not the largest consulate that the Chinese have in America. And if they're conducting espionage out of Houston, you can only imagine they're doing it in other consulates as well. Maybe we'd see some activity in San Francisco. Now, interestingly, one of the researchers, medical researcher, a Chinese scientist who was wanted for questioning by the FBI, had taken refuge in the San Francisco embassy and wouldn't come out, sort of like Julian Assange did in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. And after the Houston embassy was ordered closed, she did surrender to authorities. So maybe the Chinese were afraid that we would close the San Francisco embassy, and they did not want to see that happen. But I can imagine that they're conducting a wide range of espionage and trade secret theft campaigns in the Silicon Valley area, and they would be doing that at their San Francisco consulate.
Well, I only got about 4 minutes left. I hate to hit you with two heavy questions, but maybe give you some quick answers.
Sure.
Is China, are we right in blaming China for the COVID spread, number one? And number two, a different subject, Hong Kong. How much of a headache is that for China these days?
Well, we're absolutely right to blame China for the spread of the COVID virus. This was, whether it was created in a laboratory by accident through gain-of-function research that shouldn't have been carried out or not, what we do know, we do know this. What we do know is that China tried to cover up the leakage and the initial outbreak in Wuhan. Instead of reporting it in a timely manner to international authorities and even to their own authorities, their own public health experts, they arrested doctors. They arrested the people who were aware of this. They tried to shut them up. They put them in handcuffs, if you will, for spreading rumors. We lost time in dealing with it. We could have contained this outbreak much more readily had they not tried to cover it up. And then they continued to cover it up, even though they knew they had this pandemic and they had this epidemic outbreak. They sent a huge delegation to Washington to sign the Phase 1 trade deal, and that was unacceptable. That it's really like what happened with the Japanese before Pearl Harbor. As they were preparing the strike force on Pearl Harbor, they sent their diplomats to Washington to talk peace. They knew they were preparing for war, but they talked peace. Here, the Chinese knew they were preparing for this global pandemic, but they acted like nothing was going on. That's unacceptable. Hong Kong is a major headache for China because that is a source of funding. The lifeblood of the Chinese Communist Party is Western capital. And the Hong Kong financial system is the aorta. It is the major artery for Western capital to feed the Chinese Communist Party. And if they lose that flow of blood, if you will, if they lose that flow of money, their situation is very precarious. So it's very important that the United States and Western countries cut their ties with Hong Kong, cut off the money that flows through Hong Kong into China. A lot of these Chinese companies, they float their stock. They conduct public offerings of their stock through the Chinese stock exchange. These companies are not transparent. They're very often totally fraudulent. And we have no way of knowing if they're fraudulent or not because they don't open their books. Very foolish to invest in Chinese companies. The American government is not allowing its own retirement funds to be invested in Chinese companies. And the United States government should not allow private pension funds to invest in Chinese companies either. That could be done. The Labor Department has jurisdiction over this. And whether these companies are listed on the American exchange or on the Hong Kong exchange or the Shanghai exchange, there is no reason whatsoever that we should be allowing American pension funds to be invested in these Chinese companies.
Yeah, you and I have talked about that before. It's staggering that happens. Why don't we just stop it?
Well, Wall Street's making a lot of money.
Yeah.
Wall Street makes a lot of money. It doesn't matter where the money goes. They get their piece. Even if you get ripped off and lose it all, they've already cashed their commission check.
Yeah, I get it. Well, you're fascinating, Curtis. Thank you. This whole subject is really interesting. But one other quick question, 30 seconds. Do you think it would be business as usual had not President Trump blown the whistle on China after his election?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The foreign policy establishment in America is aghast that President Trump took this step. They can't wait to get back to business as usual. You look at the advisors surrounding Joe Biden. He would take it back to where it was. That would be the end of America as we know it within a few short years. China is very close to achieving its goal of supplanting the United States. And if President Trump hadn't come along, we'd be in much worse shape already.
God bless you, my friend. Thank you for your time. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out his website, alapac.org, alapac.org. Curtis Ellis. Thank you, my friend. God bless you, friend.
Thank you. God bless.